Okay, AP Literature friends. So for this one, I want to talk about how I use Oscar-nominated shorts to really kind of shore up how to write introductory paragraphs for FRQ1 and FRQ2 for the AP Literature exam. So there's an impetus and a method to the madness backstory to this. So in terms of context, we're just a few days away, a few class periods away from the exam. And I have a number of students in this pandemic year where we're dealing with endless COVID gaps, where for whatever reasons, this year in particular, having a really hard time, a few of my students, with that concept of universal truth. I hear a lot of teachers refer to it that way, universal truth, when a student is trying to ascertain the meaning of a poem or a work of prose, like a short story or even novels and plays. The universal truth. So I refer to that as the authorial intent and the construction of meaning in my template. But the other night, I was just tossing and turning, thinking about how I can resurrect and try to save the year and get scores to where I would like them to be. And just kind of had this download in bed of use shorts. This is a phenomenal one called Hair Love that was a huge hit with my students. They loved this. And it's very poignant. It's only, I think, about 7 or 8 minutes long. It's free on YouTube and it won a ton of awards. It's fantastic. So as a little side, I'm going to use it as a supplementary piece next year when I teach The Hate You Give with my Regents level juniors. So it's just fantastic. So what I'm going to do in this test prep sort of writing workshop is demonstrate how my students used this video, this film, Hair Love, and we practiced cranking introductions while incorporating my template of the inverted and declarative thesis for like an FRQ1-esque, FRQ2-esque introduction. So I felt like I was killing them with poetry and prose that I had to switch the medium up a little bit. So I'll show you how my students house their thesis and their reasoning in the introductory paragraph with my templates. So I know some of you are familiar with my work, and this will all make perfect sense. And some of you are brand new to this, so I'll go kind of medium pace, I suppose. So the question that is the real drive behind my work as a composition teacher is this: what if we taught composition like Bob Ross teaches painting? I ask that of teachers all the time because there's a huge difference between the assigning of teaching, the assigning of writing, and the direct teaching of it. And I always tell teachers, man, be the Bob Ross of composition. You're the expert. Get to your easel, get to your canvas, and paint with your students, right? So like when Bob Ross comes on the screen and says, we're going to paint a New England wood-covered bridge today in our painting. He doesn't say deuces and leave you guys to figure it out on your own. He gets it right there and he shows you how to do it. And that's how my templates work, is by me being the Bob Ross of composition. I'm always painting with my kids, but given that it's so close to the exam, I did not help them with this at all. You're seeing truly their writing without me giving them any assistance at all, because that's the goal of a template, right? Is that idea that you're going to kick the training wheels off eventually and remove the scaffolding. So that's where we're at this time of year. So don't be afraid. Be the expert writer and show them how to do this. So the immediate question is, how do you even write an introduction? And with my template, my guys are either going to declare or invert the thesis. So implicit in the prompt, though, right? If we're going to make some College Board-esque prompt around Hair Love, implicit in it would be two questions. What is the authorial intent and how does the author construct meaning? I tell my students all the time, and even the teachers that I consult, if your student answers those questions articulately and ascertains the meaning, the essence, the exigence of the passage, then they're going to come out of the gates blazing if they have any knack whatsoever for writing and just basic composition. So that's kind of like the guts and the glory right there. What is the authorial intent and how does the author construct meaning? So in my template, my students are going to answer both of those questions. Now, there are two possibilities. You can declare the thesis, which is what you're looking at here. And just a big aside. We don't declare the thesis for literary analysis, so we're going to skip this one. So the declarative is for rhetorical analysis. So this is a heavy hitter in when I teach AP Lang, and it's really good for synthesis, argument, persuasion, and research. So those expository modes, it's about a 50-50 split between declarative and inverted. But just real quickly, just to kind of hit it here, if you declare, you're going to begin with your thesis, fill it in with context, background, tier 2 level vocab, which I'll define in just a second, sentence constructs, which I'll define in a second, and then every introduction my students write, if they are employing my template, is going to be 4 sentences long, no more, no less, exactly 4 sentences. So this is what we're concerned with for this exercise, though. We're going to invert because we're performing literary analysis. And when we invert, we end with the thesis. So here's kind of the kicker. The very first 3 sentences of the introductory paragraph are going to answer the question, what is the authorial intent? Right? So like the exigence, the thesis. Why did Matthew Cherry make this film? Right? What's his point? So 3 sentences, so you flesh that out with context and background. And then the last sentence is going to be the thesis, and we're answering the question, how does the author construct meaning? So what is the authorial intent? 3 sentences. How does the author construct meaning? Boom, thesis, last sentence. So you got to put some context and background in that, right? You're not writing in a vacuum. I like to see my students exercise some tier 2 level vocabulary, which is just basically your average run-of-the-mill SAT level words. So I do a very intensive word study academy with my students all year long. Vocab is a biggie for me. Sentence constructs, and again, some of you are familiar with my work, so this is old hat, so I'm going to fly over this quickly. I use a book called Strunk and White's Write It Right, and it's free. You can get a PDF online if you would like. So Strunk and White, Write It Right. And in it, they have all the rules for grammar, punctuation, and syntax, but they also have some really cool rules to teach kids voice, rhythm, and flow. And in it, they have a concept called rule number 18. And they assert that there's 12 different ways to write one sentence. And I love that idea because I want my students to be able to manipulate their syntax so that they have pizzazz and flair, and like really good voice, have it be supple and nuanced because, I want them to, be advanced. Obviously, it's college board exams. So you're going to see my students do some tricky things with their syntax. Some might not be as good as others, but they're trying. And the inverted, like the declarative, is going to be 4 sentences long. No more, no less. So let's see what they did here for this. So for Hair Love, and again, I did not model this. I did not Bob Ross it. This is what my students are doing heading into the exam. So beauty, no matter one's background, is about being comfortable in the skin you're asked to wear. And when we read these in class, we always say, bingo, Yeah, that's it. That's Cherry's whole point. Yes, indeed. That's the exigence, right? That's the gusto. That's why he created this. That's his thesis. So you start, I tell my guys, like, get cutthroat, man. Just drop it, like immediately. What's the main idea? So that's perfect. So we'll take it from the top again. Beauty, no matter one's background, is about being comfortable in the skin you're asked to wear. Unfortunately, societal standards and expectations can make self-love and self-acceptance hard to achieve. Whether it be things like race, ethnicity, gender, and even one's own health, twisted social norms can be a barrier toward one's understanding of their own beauty. Matthew A. Cherry explores these ideas through his depiction of long-standing stereotypes and a heartfelt narrative. So that last sentence, all right, look at that. That's where we get into the construction of meaning. So I want my students to use their literary terms and devices, right? Because we're performing literary analysis, and I remind my kids that all the time. You're not writing a cliff note summation, right? You're not writing plot summary. You're performing literary analysis, and you got to argue because it's expository writing. So the first three sentences, authorial intent. Fourth sentence, construction of meaning. So the vocab's good in this one without sounding, too goony. The kid's not contrived or pretentious. He stays in his wheelhouse. And the sentence constructs are pretty cool. So you see, probably my kids use a lot of hyphens. Like when I model and write with them, I use a lot of hyphens. So that's probably my fault if you think that's too intrusive. I have to hold them back sometimes from it. So one question we have to ask ourselves is this, though: to drop the lit devices in the intro or not to drop the lit devices in the intro? It's kind of a teacher preference, and I have my students make author choices. So my students know where they're at with regards to the good, the bad, the ugly, um, as far as their writing goes. And my struggling and emerging writers, I want them to articulate the terms and devices to make it really empirically evident to the AP reader that they have a thesis statement. My high flyers, mid-range to high flyers, they don't need to. Like, they can articulate a thesis subtly without being so dutiful and dogged to the task. So some of my students might do something like this, and they're going to do it the exact same way. They're just going to actually, it's the next one. I got ahead of myself. This one does use the term. So this one's going to follow the exact same template as what we just looked at. First three sentences, authorial intent. Last sentence, construction of meaning. Four sentences, sentence constructs, tier 2. Beauty begins the moment a person decides to love themselves. I love the simplicity of that. That's the whole shebang. That's the whole film. But oftentimes in life and in society, there are enormous obstacles in place that preclude this from happening. Unfortunately, social constructs like stereotypical gender roles and racial identity blur one's vision of their true self. In Hair Love, Matthew Cherry explores these ideas through his use of extended metaphor and tonal shifts. So drop the terms and devices in that last sentence. So every single time my students do FRQ1 and FRQ2, this is how they approach the introduction, right? So you got to get that universal truth. Some people call it exigence. I don't know. I call it authorial intent, construction of meaning. So use, the terminology that works for you. So here is one that does not use the terms or devices. So they skip the literary terms and devices. It's gonna follow the exact same template. You just leave them out. And for those that are familiar with my work, you know that in the first premise of the syllogistic body paragraph, that's my template, the syllogistic method. In the first premise, the terms are going to be placed there. So some of my students feel like they're being redundant if they do it twice. So again, it's just author choice. Some of my guys are like, I'm not doing it in the intro, and they'll proceed like this. Regardless of arbitrary traits like race, gender, and ability, no one can pull a person down if there's an awareness of one's own inner strength and beauty. But as is often the case, the individual themselves is the biggest culprit in sabotaging one's self-image and perception. Granted, however, arbitrary social rules are what fuel that negative self-talk and perpetuate the cycle. As cliche as it may sound, and I know I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, but you get the gist of the template, and it's okay. It's okay. As cliche as it may sound, Cherry reminds us of one thing: beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I talked to this kid about this. I was like, "Hey, Jason, man, that's like a super cliche, but when you're going for universal truths and big, complex reads, but you can see how he manipulated uh, the template nonetheless to yield a thesis. And that's all you really need, right? You need a thesis and, brownie points and gravy points if you can, crank the complexity and the nuance on top of that. So here's one more. No matter of things such as race, gender, or health, to fall in love with yourself is the first secret to happiness. My kids were really, really, really good with that universal truth. I love that opening line. Crush that opening line. Ironically, however, we all have to contend with the inner voice. That person that lives deep within us is perhaps the cruelest and meanest being one will ever face. And now look at this last sentence. We're back to where we began with the first exemplars. Through his extended metaphor and character juxtapositions, Cherry illustrates that happiness can only be achieved once we make peace with our negative self-talk. So these guys, I'm liking this. I feel like they're ready for the exam. The guys that are writing like this. So that's how I want them to do it. And in a time situation, we've been practicing this since September 7th. I got my kids, I'm in New York State, so I got my kids after Labor Day. So from September 7th, to the middle of May, we're good in the hood. So we're feeling pretty confident. So anyways, hopefully you found this to be useful. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. So I've been posting pretty regularly there. As you guys probably know, I have a few irons in the fire, and the biggest one is that Tim Freitas and Brandon Abden and I will be presenting together at the National Writing Project this fall in Anaheim, California. So super stoked about that. On a monthly basis, I'm in the cadence at Perfection Learning, so pay attention to their post, and I'll keep you guys updated. I do it like a webinar a month with that. And then I'm also doing some side gigs with the National Writing Project, some professional development with them, and I'll let the groups know. And then I offer some PD. Soon I'm going to be reoffering my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind, and I'm going to cap that probably to like 4 or 5 students. So if my work intrigues you and you're like, I'd like to work more with this guy to pick his brain, you can learn about my templates and my alternative grading methods and my Plato's Plato discussion and all that crazy stuff that I do. And I also have a self-paced course if time's an issue. So if you want these slides that are featured here for Hair Love, you can email me at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. You can send any questions, comments, concerns that in that direction as well. And I do have a webpage, teachinghowtowrite.com, with my PD offerings, and there's like some free stuff on there too. So hopefully this helps you guys test prep and get your kids prepared. So be well.